The USO show had just ended on the makeshift stage at Moji, and the evening air still hummed with the echo of a Glenn Miller tune. For 1 hour, the soldiers had forgotten the war, clapping along to the music and watching the dancers spin under the palm fronds. Private Eddie Cantor, no relation to the famous comedian, as he always joked, stood by the edge of the stage, clutching his camera beat-up Kodak his father had given him before he shipped out. Photography was his escape, his way of making sense of the chaos. That was some show, huh? A voice said behind him. Eddie turned to find one of the performers, a young woman in a crisp USO uniform, wiping sweat from her forehead with a handkerchief. Her name was Margaret, and she'd sung 2 solos that had brought tears to more than a few eyes. "Yeah," Eddie managed. "You were? I mean, your singing was really something." Margaret smiled. "Thanks. First time we've done that one outdoors." The humidity's murder on the vocal cords. She noticed the camera in his hands. "You the bass photographer?" "Just unofficial," Eddie said, holding up the Kodak. "I take pictures. For the guys, so they can send them home. Remember they were here, I guess." Margaret's expression softened. She looked out at the soldiers milling about, some still humming the tunes, others already drifting back toward their duties. "They all look so young," she said quietly. "They are," Eddie replied. "Most of them anyway." A sergeant nearby called out, "Hey, Eddie, get one of me and the fellas before we head out." Eddie raised the camera, then hesitated. He looked at Margaret. "Would you, could I take my picture?" She laughed, a genuine sound that cut through the jungle noise. "Sure, but make it quick. Bus leaves in 10. He nodded, raising the camera again. Margaret posed by the stage, one hand on the wooden frame, smiling that same professional smile she'd worn on stage. "No," Eddie said, lowering the camera. "Not like that," Margaret blinked. "What do you mean?" Eddie struggled to find the words. "That smile is for the crowd. But this picture? This one's for keeps. For the guys to remember what they're fighting for. Real moments. Not performances." Margaret stared at him for a long moment. Then her smile changed, softened, became something private and genuine. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked not at the camera, but past it, toward the dark line of jungle where the real war waited. Eddie pressed the shutter. "Click. Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you," Margaret replied, "for remembering we're all just people here." The bus honked in the distance. Margaret squeezed his arm once and hurried away, joining the other performers climbing aboard. Eddie watched the bus disappear down the muddy road, then looked down at his camera. That single frame held something precious, not just a pretty girl by a stage, but a moment of truth in a world full of performances. 3 weeks later, Eddie was gone, transferred to another island, another battle. But the photograph remained. It got pinned up in the mess hall, then copied and tucked into footlockers and pockets. Some called it the USO girl. Others just called her home. Nobody knew her name anymore. But that one real smile, captured in a fraction of a second on a humid evening in Moji, traveled with those men through the rest of the war, and for those who made it back, all the way home. Sometimes Eddie thought years later, sitting in his quiet studio in Ohio, that's what a photograph does best. It doesn't capture the war. It captures the reason for fighting it.